It started with a smell. Not just any smell. This was different. Sour, metallic, rotten in a way that made people stop in the hallway, wrinkle their noses, and walk a little faster. The neighbors of apartment 301, just a short walk from the busy Indios Verdes metro station in Mexico City, had smelled strange things before, but this was something else. It was the kind of stench you can't forget, no matter how many candles you light or windows you open. At first, people thought it was garbage, maybe spoiled meat, maybe a backed-up drain, but it kept getting worse, day after day, and no one ever saw the woman who lived inside the apartment, Anabel Gómez López. She used to be out there every morning, selling tamales from her cart, offering smiles and spicy sauces with every bite. But now the shutters stayed down, the cart disappeared, and the smell only grew stronger. Eventually, a neighbor called the gas company, worried about a leak. Technicians arrived, knocked, no answer. They called the landlord, still nothing. So they opened the door, and what they found inside was not a leak. There was meat, yes, but not pork, not chicken. In the kitchen sink, half submerged in a grimy basin, were bones, human bones, stained, broken, and stripped of their flesh. In the freezer, wrapped in layers of plastic, were bags of raw meat, red, thick, and unmistakably wrong. And in the back room, under layers of old clothes and newspaper, a corpse, or what was left of one. It would take days to identify everything, but the one thing investigators knew immediately, they had just stepped into the home of a killer.
The neighborhood had always known her as kind, quiet. She sold tamales on the corner. She waved to neighbors. Her voice was soft, almost grandmotherly. She offered extra sauce without charging. Her cart was always clean. And yet, something wasn't right in that building. People talked. They whispered. There was the smell first. A thick, metallic stench that no air freshener could hide. It would seep into the stairwell on hot days, clinging to people's clothes. They made jokes at first. Maybe she left meat out too long. Maybe the drain was backed up. But the jokes stopped when her tenant disappeared. Apartment 301, second floor. To a young woman who had just moved in. Bright, friendly, full of plans. She'd been there a month. One day, she was seen unlocking her door. The next, nothing. No bags packed, no goodbyes, just gone. People knocked, no answer. Anabel told them she'd moved out, said she left suddenly, in the middle of the night. Maybe she had family trouble, she said. Maybe she ran. But someone noticed her tamale cart looked heavier that morning. Someone noticed a different meatiness to the tamales that week. Someone noticed, but said nothing. And the hallway kept smelling worse. Still, no one called the police. Not yet. Not until the second woman vanished. This one had kids, a boyfriend, a routine. And suddenly, no trace. That's when fear took over. People started avoiding the hallway, stopped talking to Anabel. Neighbors started whispering even louder. If she spoke to you now, they said, you didn't speak back. If you smelled that smell, you walked faster. Still, the building remained silent. Still, no door was knocked down. Still, no one asked the questions that should have been asked. Because deep down, no one wanted the answer.
The building was holding its breath. The children stopped playing in the hallway. Tenants left quickly in the morning, returned even faster at night. Doors shut a little harder. Curtains stayed drawn. Apartment 301 became the eye of a storm no one could name, but everyone felt. Then came the power outage. It lasted only a few hours. A blown transformer. Routine, they said. But in that blackout, someone heard something. A loud thud. Something heavy hitting tile. Then the sound of metal dragging. The kind of sound that scratches itself into memory because it doesn't belong. When the lights came back on, Anabel was outside, calmly sweeping the sidewalk, as if nothing had happened, as if the night hadn't swallowed something whole. It was the building manager who finally took notice. Rent was unpaid, the room was quiet, and there were too many questions. When he unlocked the door to 301, he expected dust, clutter, maybe a squatter's mess. He didn't expect the smell to hit him like a slap. Inside, silence. But not emptiness. The place was too clean. Bleached floor, no bed sheets, just a single wooden chair facing the window. A fan turning slowly, and a kitchen that looked prepared, like it had seen use, like something had just been washed. He didn't stay long. He backed out and locked it again. Called someone. 2 days later, police arrived. They knocked on her door. She smiled when she opened it, welcomed them in, but they weren't there for tea. They asked about the tenant. She shrugged, said people come and go. She's just a landlady. She makes tamales. Nothing more. The officers noticed the large pot on her stove. Still warm. And in that moment, something shifted.
The pot simmered with silence. One of the officers lifted the lid. Steam hit his face. The scent was rich, spiced. Tamales, maybe? Familiar, comforting. But something about it didn't sit right. There was an undertone beneath the corn and chilies. Metallic. Wrong. He replaced the lid slowly. They asked her what was inside. She smiled again. Said it was for tomorrow's batch. Extra special. Always fresh. One officer wandered further in. The apartment wasn't large, but it had layers. The fridge buzzed. On the counter sat stacks of clean containers, neatly labeled with masking tape. Some read red, others just had dates. He opened the fridge. Inside, a few vegetables, a sealed jug of water, and a tightly wrapped package, labeled in red ink. No name, no explanation. The second officer opened a drawer. Kitchen tools. Nothing unusual. Another drawer empty. Then one more. Bones. Cleaned. Bleached. Arranged like a puzzle half finished. Not animal. Suddenly, the tension broke. The woman moved. Quickly, not violently. She reached for the pot again. The officer stopped her. Not with force, but with presence. She paused, then stepped back. They asked her to sit. She did, calmly. Folded hands, a faint hum under her breath. Reinforcements came soon after. They didn't speak much. No one did. The apartment was cordoned off. Neighbors gathered in the hallway, whispering. Some cried. Others watched in silence, arms crossed, eyes wide with disbelief. Inside, detectives took photographs, bagged everything, opened the freezer. What they found made them go still. Plastic bags, layered, sealed. Inside, meat. Red, thick, fibrous. No clear origin, but not store-bought, not even close. It was too late for denial, too late for tamales. Something was very, very wrong inside apartment 301. Word spread fast. The building was sealed. Forensics moved in. Apartment 301 wasn't just another unit. It was a crime scene unlike anything they'd seen before. The investigators didn't speak much, but their faces told stories. Horror, confusion, a creeping revulsion. Inside the freezer, wrapped in plastic and butcher paper, were more packages, some labeled, others not. They were all taken into evidence. DNA testing began. Days passed. The woman, Anabel, spoke very little.
She neither confessed nor denied, only said she'd been making tamales for years, that she never hurt anyone, that the meat was a gift from God. But science didn't care for riddles. The results confirmed what many feared: human remains. Several packages matched missing persons cases, people who had vanished from the neighborhood. One of them had been a tenant in that very building. Another was a street vendor who had simply disappeared one night after closing shop. None of it made sense. Neighbors were interviewed. Most described Anabel as polite, quiet, always cooking, always working. Some had bought tamales from her cart for years. One woman said she felt sick. Another broke down crying. A man yelled into the news camera, said he'd eaten her food almost every day, that his children had too. The investigators dug deeper. Behind a cabinet, they found notebooks, dozens of them, all handwritten. Ingredient lists, names, dates, drawings. Some pages were recipes. Others were disturbing ramblings. Purification, one read. The soul is in the flavor. The deeper they looked, the darker it got. One page had a name, crossed out. Another was circled in red. The handwriting grew erratic near the end. Detectives theorized she had kept trophies, but the bones in the drawer, the bleach, that went beyond. That was ritual. And still, through it all, Anabel waited, calm, as if none of it was a surprise, as if the world was finally catching up to something she'd known all along.
The notebooks alone could have carried the case, but investigators weren't done. They began tracing the names inside. Some matched unsolved missing persons files. Others had no record at all. No reports, no families, no follow-up. Just first names. Disconnected, unexplained, like whispers from the dark. The district attorney called it one of the most bizarre cases in Mexico's criminal history. But legally, it was fragile. There were no videos, no eyewitnesses. The meat, even when confirmed as human, didn't link her directly to the act of killing. She hadn't been caught in the act. And Anabel, she remained as still as ever. Her answers were calm, evasive. She wasn't crazy, at least not in any way the courts could easily prove. They needed more. So they dug into her past. Records were spotty. Anabel had lived in several neighborhoods, but always alone. No relatives came forward, no friends, no known employer beyond her tamale cart. Her life was a fog, fragmented, unfinished. Then came a break. A woman, middle-aged, nervous, came to the police with a memory. Years ago, she had met Anabel through a church. They had spoken once, briefly, about suffering, about purifying pain. She didn't think much of it, but she remembered the eyes, flat, unblinking, and the tamales. Always tamales. Another man, a landlord, remembered her from nearly a decade prior. She had left in the middle of the night. No notice, just vanished. And after she left, there had been a smell in the kitchen that wouldn't go away. Pattern. Not proof, but a pattern was forming. Then the forensic team made one more discovery. Inside a small wooden box in the top of her closet were teeth. Not adult teeth, milk teeth, kept like souvenirs, labeled with dates, some wrapped in cloth, one with a drawing folded beside it. The investigators didn't speak to the press after that. Anabel's court date was delayed. Psychological evaluations were ordered. The public wanted answers. The media gave them theories. But Anabel, she just sat, silent, humming under her breath, as if she was still cooking something no one understood.
The courtroom was silent. Anabel entered slowly, dressed plainly, her hair tied back, hands calm. No cuffs, no visible emotion. Just that same unreadable stillness that followed her from the moment apartment 301 was opened. Spectators filled the benches, journalists, locals, some just curious, Others still unsure what exactly had happened, what exactly she had done. Because that was the thing. No one really knew. The prosecution laid out the evidence, the meat, the bones, the journals, the teeth. They talked about ritual, obsession, pathology, but they never said the word murder with certainty. There were no bodies, no scenes of death, only aftermath, only decay. Anabel's defense said nothing had been proven. They said she was old, poor, misunderstood, that she sold food to survive, that the meat was mysterious, yes, but not conclusively linked to any single crime. The judge listened, and in the end, the charges didn't match the story. Anabel was sentenced, not for murder, but for public endangerment, food contamination, and obstruction. It was a quiet verdict, not the headline people expected, but people still whispered. The tamale cart was long gone. The building was emptied. Apartment 301 stayed sealed for months before anyone dared rent it again. And as for Anabel, she disappeared from the news. Her name faded. No more interviews, no memoirs, no answers. But in some corners of Mexico City, people still glance at food stalls a little longer, still remember the headlines, still ask where the meat came from, just to be sure. Because some stories don't end with justice. They end with silence, and a question no one can quite forget.